Sonic is a franchise that I have a weird relationship with. On one hand, I've never really cared for this series. I'd see a new game get announced, think, well that's cool, and then forget about it the next day. On the other hand, I own 4 Sonic games, not including Olympic Games or the topic of this video. I remember watching a lot of one of the Sonic cartoons as a kid, and I also watched a ton of videos about why Sonic 06 and Sonic Boom are bad games. However, my opinion towards the Sonic franchise has started to change in recent times, and that's for 2 reasons. First of all, I watched the Knuckles show in the first 2 movies, since everybody was saying that the 3rd movie was the best piece of fiction since like the moon landing or something, I don't know. I like the movies well enough, and I honestly really like the Knuckles show. I don't understand why people don't like it, it's really funny. Anyways, after watching these, I decided to go ahead and buy Sonic X Shadow Generations, because much like the 3rd movie, it was being praised a lot, and it was also on sale, so that helped. I actually ended up having a lot of fun with Sonic Generations, but here's the thing, this video isn't about that. Sonic Generations came out in 2011, that's practically prehistoric. I need to talk about something new and exciting, like Shadow Generations. Much like the Switch port of 3D World, the port of Sonic Generations contains an entire side game called Shadow Generations, which is why the game even has that slightly unfortunate name in the first place. Shadow Generations was honestly really fun, and even though I'm like 3 months late, I want to talk about it because I enjoy talking about things I like. Pretty crazy, I know. I'm gonna start with talking about the story, then gameplay, and finally some other random stuff. Oh, and this video will contain spoilers, so if you don't want to be spoiled, then click off the video. Then you should come back to it. I really need your watch time.
I'm gonna tell you about the plot or setting.
So before you start Shadow Generations, you can actually see some of Shadow's backstory. To give a quick summary, Shadow was created 50 years ago on a space colony arc because Professor Gerald Robotnik wanted to create the ultimate life form, which is weird because the ultimate life form already exists. Shadow was raised by Gerald and his granddaughter Maria, who's extremely ill, and unfortunately, she dies. Not because of her illness though, she gets shot. You always know how to start your kid's game, Sega. Anyway, Shadow was made using DNA from Black Doom, who's a very evil guy and also the main villain of this game. Shadow almost destroys the world, but then he doesn't, and that's the end of this backstory. Let's get to the actual game now, starting with a quick story recap. Shadow Generations start with Shadow aboard the space colony arc because there's apparently a very evil threat there. Also, Rouge the Bat informs him that he's missing Sonic's birthday party from Sonic Generations, which means that the Time Eater will soon show up to send everyone to the White Void from that game. After going through the arc, Shadow runs into Black Doom, who begins warping the world around him. By the way, this warped city looks really cool. I'll get a bit more into this later in the video, but the game as a whole looks amazing. Doom ends up escaping Shadow, who proceeds to go deeper into the arc. Eventually, he ends up finding a fake Chaos Emerald that looks just like the real one. Then the Time Eater shows up and transports Shadow to the White Void, where he has to go through zones he's visited in his past and future from all of the most iconic Sonic games like Sonic 06 and Sonic Forces. Once he collects some keys, Shadow fights the game's first boss, that being the Bio Lizard, and after beating him, Black Doom comes back telling Shadow that he's gonna consume the world, so better stop him before he does that. After you beat the 2 axes Joan has, you unlock new characters to interact with, those being Orbot, Cubot, Rouge, Big the Cat, and most importantly to the story, Maria and Gerald. Yeah, so the game uses its time travel plotline to bring back 2 of the most important characters from Shadow's past, back from the dead, which is really cool. I get more into this when I gave my thoughts on the story, but I'm glad that it actually uses the time travel concept for some cool story stuff, unlike Sonic Generations. Anyways, the return of Maria and Jim Carrey isn't all happy because suddenly, Jim Carrey says something really disturbing.
Look what came out of my egg sack.
Not that, weirdo. Gerald says that he made a deal with Black Doom to make Shadow, and his big evil plan is to take over Shadow's body to become the ultimate weapon and consume the world. I mean, going from this to this seems like kind of a downgrade, but okay. The next major story beat after this is Sonic showing up because they had a fight in Sonic Generations, and his interaction is just really funny. So far in the game, Shadow reunited with his 2 favorite dead people, and learned that Black Doom is both trying to consume the world and take over his body. Pretty scary stuff. But then Sonic shows up to say some of his wacky one-liners.
Destroy me? You and what mustache?
Sonic takes Shadow's Chaos Emerald, but as it turns out, it was a fake one from the start of the game, a twist that I genuinely didn't see coming. Good job, Sonic. Black Doom shows up against a Yap, and Shadow gets really mad, which makes Maria sad, because the old Shadow was a lot more happy and not such an edgelord.
This is like taking candy from a baby, which is fine by me.
After Shadow beats another boss, Black Doom really starts tweaking out, turning the sky into a FNAF 4 red. It's time for Shadow to go over to him to fight. Shadow and Black Doom, who is now Devil Doom, have an epic fight, which ends in Shadow saying the Iron Man line and piercing through Devil Doom's body as yellow blood pours out of him until he explodes. I'd like to speak to the ESRB. Shadow comes back to the White Void and he gives the real Chaos Emerald to Rouge so that she can give it to Sonic, since he's about to fight the Time Eater now. Things are all fine though, because now that Doom is gone, everything is getting sent back to their timeline, including Gerald and Maria. Shadow tries to tell them that they're gonna die, but before he can finish, Maria tells him that she'll always be in his heart, and she vanishes with Gerald. How wholesome. Still gonna die though. Then Shadow begins crying and runs to help Sonic by saying one line. The end. So that was the story of Shadow Generations. Honestly, it was much better than I expected, which, to be fair, was nothing. The Sonic games I've played weren't exactly very story driven. I'm surprised by the more serious tone it has. I played this after finishing the Knuckles show, which is just 6 episodes of bowling and epic musicals, and it was quite the jarring tonal shift.
Regardless of how you feel about childhood abandonment, and I'm against it. Me too. The deals at TJ Maxx.
My biggest problem with Sonic Generations is that its time travel concept is pretty much just an excuse to reimagine old levels and reintroduce an old Sonic moveset, which is by no means a bad thing, but I don't know. I can't help but feel a bit disappointed that a cool concept like Sonic meeting a past version of himself and Jim Carrey was wasted with such a nothing story. Like, come on, that's something Mario would do, and I thought that Genesis did what Nintendo don't. That's why only one of these companies still makes consoles. Shadow Generations, on the other hand, actually uses a time travel plot for a cool story. What a novel concept. First of all, Shadow finally reuniting with Maria and Gerald after them being dead for 50 years was really cool. I can imagine all the longtime Sonic fans screaming their lungs out like a FNAF fan when William Afton comes back for the 20th time. I think it's cool how Maria reacts to what Shadow has become, upset that he's now edgy and says everyone's handing up swears. I like how she attempts to remind him that he should be driven by happiness, not anger, and that violence is never the answer, except when it is. Black Doom was such a good villain as well. The Sonic Generations time meter felt less like an actual villain and more as an excuse for a time travel story. He shows up at the start of the game to take everyone to the White Void, after the Eggman fights to take them away, and at the end of the game so that Sonic can fight him. The time meter really doesn't do much. Black Doom, on the other hand, is really good. I like how since he technically created him, Black Doom was trying to use his influence to make Shadow do some really evil stuff. I like the little bit of character development Shadow has where he learns that maybe he shouldn't be such a delinquent all the time, but I'm like 99% sure this is going to be ignored in his next appearance, so whatever. That's what I have to say about Shadow Generation story. I thought I'd have more to talk about, but honestly I can't think of anything else I wanted to mention. I'm probably going to upload this video and then remember something I'm going to talk about. Happens more than you think. It's no Despicable Me 2, but I enjoyed the story for this game. Now let's move on to the most important part of any game, that being the gameplay. Shadow Generations is a Sonic Boost game. For those who don't know, Sonic Boost games consist of going through a stage in either 2D or 3D while boosting. It's in the name. All the stages here were really fun. I really like Space Colony Arc, Sunset Heights, and Chaos Island, but Doomorph is really fun to use. Speaking of which, Shadow Generations adds some things to the boost formula to help differentiate it from other games like Sonic Forces in more ways than a critical reception. First are the Doom abilities. Every time you beat a boss, you unlock 1 of 5 abilities. There's a Doom Sphere, which lets you throw spears to activate stuff, Doom Blast, which throws certain enemies, Doom Surf, which lets you be on water, Doom Morph, which lets you go on purple stuff, and finally Doom Wings, which lets you fly if you have 50 rings. These powers are all a really nice addition to the gameplay, but honestly I don't really like the Doom Surf. I hate how it constantly moves forward. It makes collecting things in the overworld kind of annoying. Yes, I know I have a skill issue. The second main difference this game has compared to the other boost games is the fact that there's a hub world, which is honestly really good. Sonic Generations hub world is lame. Everything is in 2D. What do it look like to you, an old person? I want my games in glorious 3 dimensions. Shadow Generations has an open zone hub world similar to Sonic Frontiers, and exploring the map is honestly really fun. I spent like 45 minutes procrastinating writing the scripts, just running around the hub world collecting screws for Orbot and Cubot to help build this rocket. I'd love to tell you what collecting every screw did, but there's 80 of them and I didn't get them all. The hub world is also filled with chests you can open with tokens found in stages and challenges, as well as some random time travels. Opening chests or completing time travels will give you extras, which I'll talk more about later. In addition to the regular levels, there are challenges for you to complete to get keys and fight bosses. These challenges throw you into a certain section of a level and give you a certain objective, like having to collect a certain amount of rings, or making you use Chaos Control, an ability that allows you to stop time to get to the end of the stage before the timer runs out. These challenges are fun. My favorites are the ones where we need to defeat a certain amount of enemies because I just really like using the homing attack, but I do have one major criticism with these challenges. Getting the S rank on these is way too easy. Part of what makes getting an S rank in the game feel so rewarding is having to play a level over and over again, memorizing every bit of it until you do everything perfectly and get that S rank. I think that Pizza Tower is a great example of this. Even on the easiest levels, getting the S or P rank is hard, but after trying over and over again, finally getting that perfect run was incredibly satisfying. I got the S rank on all but 2 or 3 of Shadow Generations challenges on my first try. I mean, maybe I'm just too much of a pro gamer, but S ranking these challenges was way too easy, even if the challenge itself was hard. Off camera, I decided to go back and get some of the chest tokens and challenges, and for some of them, I still got the S rank, even though I wasn't going too fast as to not miss any tokens. The only requirement for getting an S rank is to beat a level or challenge in a certain amount of time, so I think that to make it a bit harder, you should also need to collect a certain amount of rings or something as well, I don't know. Weirdly enough, the only 2 challenges that I actually struggled to get the S rank for were the ones included in the game's movie DLC. So since the 3rd Sonic movie came out about 2 months after this game, Sega made a little DLC based off it, where Shadow is voiced by Keanu Reeves like in the movie, but here it sounds like he was woken up at 3 AM by Sega, telling him to come down and immediately record his lines, or else he'd be typecast as a tumbleweed for the rest of his life.
Where am I now?
Other than the poor voice acting though, the DLC was pretty good. The Tokyo level and challenges were fun, and again, S ranking them was actually hard. My only real complaint is that the best character from the movies, that being Wade Whipple, isn't in it. Adding him would have made this DLC a 10 out of 10.
Father, you can't leave me.
I won't, son. I never.
The boss fights here were good as well. My favorite has gotta be the final one against Devil Doom. It utilizes all the Doom abilities you've gained throughout the game, which I just find really cool. That being said, I wasn't really a fan of the fight against Mephiles. I think he's a cool character and all. I like how his motivation is to be real, but the fight was just kind of lame. You pretty much just use a Dumorph to run into Mephiles. I like the part where you have to swing up to him, but that's about it. The fight was way too easy. It's the only one I even S-ranked. The Biolizard and Metal Overlord were good though. And this is kind of off topic, but all the bosses in this game look like horror movie monsters, or I guess more accurately, the final bosses of a Kirby game, but you know, they're practically the same thing. Overall, Shadow Generations gameplay is really good. This is by far the most fun I've had playing a Sonic game. It made me understand why people like these games so much. I'll never understand why people hate the Knuckles show though. It's peak, guys, trust me.
Then boil your bones and eat you like a fish. Then I might hit Facebook Marketplace up.
I bet no one expected this baby could fly.
Okay, so before I end the video, I want to quickly talk about some stuff that I didn't have enough to say on to give them their own section. First of all, the game looks absolutely incredible. It was so jarring going from a game with literal Wii graphics to a game that should be setting my Switch on fire. Yeah, I played this on my Switch, a console that runs in a potato battery, and yet despite that, the game looks and runs really well. I especially liked all the areas worked by Black Doom. The weird city background looks really cool. Also, the models are surprisingly good. You can even see the fur and scales on some of the characters. I did not know the Switch was able to render all of that without exploding. The animation here is great as well, but it's also smooth and expressive, especially in the pre-rendered cutscenes. It looks like somebody's putting that movie money to good use. Like I mentioned while talking about the gameplay, Shadow Generations has plenty of extras for you to find around the hub world that you can later look at in the collection room. There's concept art, music, character bios, pieces of Gerald's journal, and more of Shadow's backstory. Speaking of which, I like the music in this game, especially the themes for Space Colony New York, Kingdom Valley, and the bosses. They're all really good. Oh, and this is just a minor nitpick, but sometimes the music in cutscenes is a bit too loud and I can't hear the dialogue. Before you ask, I did not mess around with the audio settings. That's all I have to say for this section. I like the story, I thought I had more to comment on, but I really don't. Shadow Generations is a good game, and I recommend you play it, even though I spoiled the entire story for you. I warned you about spoilers at the start. If you didn't listen to me, that's your fault. In conclusion, Shadow Generations was surprisingly good. It made me want to go back and finish Frontiers and Superstars, because I never actually finished them. Hopefully, future Sonic games continue having this level of quality, because if they do, I can genuinely see these games rivaling the likes of Mario like in the olden days. I mean, that's probably not gonna happen. People know about Mario more than a country of Italy, but hey, Sonic has better movies, so that's something, I guess. Now, if you excuse me, I've got to go rewatch the Knuckles show. I just can't get enough of Wade Whipple. Bye, I guess.